and the National Rifle Association. Chef Milos was the first certified master chef in the United States. Chef Milos won the coveted gold medal of distinction for a perfect score in 11 dishes at the Culinary Olympics. He led a team which also won 38 gold medals in national and international competition, and climaxed it all by winning the grand prize in gold at the Culinary Olympics. Although there are other fine chefs, rarely will you find one who has received such acclaim and is a dedicated, experienced hunter who has bagged moose, elk, caribou, antelope, bear, and numerous deer with gun and bow. Chef Milos conducts popular game cooking seminars and is also writing a major wild game cookbook. In this tape, Venison Cooking, Healthy and Tasty, Chef Milos will demonstrate marinades, their purpose and application, curing venison for smoking, creating a mouth-watering venison stew using red wine, currant jelly, and dried fruit. He also cooks a pot roast with sour cream. He shows us how to create a simple venison roast. He'll cook steak sautéed with mushrooms and cognac and prepare some suitable side dishes, which are great when served with wild game. Now, let's join Chef Milos in the kitchen.
On this program, we are going to show you how to marinate the venison. The same procedure is employed by marinating other meats, for example, bear or elk or antelope. It would be very much similar one to another. I have some vegetables here. I have carrots, and this is root parsley, and onion, and celery, of course. And I also have root celery, which is very, very good. If you can get it, it is better than the regular celery branches. The vegetables don't have to be peeled. It's not important to peel the vegetables, really, as long as they are scrubbed clean. And what you do then is, I will trim this part off and the ends off here. And we're going to slice the vegetables up and like so. Maybe a little piece of the root celery into it. And then some onion. And that's probably pretty close what we need here. And then you take a dish, preferably glass or ceramic or plastic or at least stainless steel. You cannot use aluminum because the acid will counteract with the aluminum and you would have a not pleasant odor or taste to it, let's say. I have some cider vinegar here, and I also have some white wine here. And I have herbs and spices. I have some bay leaf here, and thyme, and whole black pepper, which could be crushed if you want to crush the black pepper. And I have some allspice berries here, a few of those, not too many. Allspice is very aromatic. You have to be careful. And I have some coriander here also. Coriander you can use more liberally. If you would want to crush any of these spices, you can use any kind of a heavy object, such as a pot, for example, here, and you just pass that over the berries and bruise them. That's what they call bruised or crushed. And then you just scoop it up and put it all together. Now you mix all these marinating ingredients together, and maybe you push some of it off to the side and put a piece of meat in and put the vegetables, kind of scoop them over to the other side and put another piece of meat there, and then you work that way until you have the meat pretty much covered with the vegetables. Then you can turn it over to make sure all the vegetables are equally coated with the marinade. That's important, that you have the coating of the marinade on them, that they get moistened with the marinade and get all the benefit of the marination. You don't need the marinade, the liquid of the marinade does not need to really cover the meat. That is not important. You should have it maybe 1/3 of the way up. That is sufficient. And after that, you would take a plastic wrap and cover it and refrigerate the dish. And then every day you would want to turn the meat over to make sure that the marination is uniform on all parts of the meat. And that's all there is to it, and now you refrigerate it. And so with the marinade, please refer to your booklet, which gives you the exact recipe, the proportions of what you need to put together. You will leave the meat marinating small pieces 1 day to 3 days in the marinade. A large piece, such as a whole hind leg, for example, if you want to marinate, I would leave that about a week to marinate in the marinade. Then on the next program here, we're going to show you how to cure venison for smoking. If you want to smoke your own venison, we're going to show you how to cure it first. Right now, I have brought with me here already weighed out the sugar and the salt. Okay, you should use pickling or kosher salt. That's important, and use you know, the right materials, because otherwise you may have problems. I have the curing salt in here, which is pink colored, and we're going to put that all into this glass bowl here. And I have honey. It is important that you weigh the ingredients. You cannot guesstimate, or you cannot go by tablespoon or a cup, because it will not work out too well. And so I have already weighed the meat in advance. That is very important. And again, follow your recipe booklet, please. And according to the weight of the meat, you only use so much sugar, so much salt, so much cure, and so much honey. The honey, I specifically have formulated this recipe for curing venison. Venison meat, of course, includes all of the deer family. That means elk, moose, deer, and mule deer, whitetail, and so on. You can also use it for antelope, which is, of course, not a member of the deer family. And the reason for a large amount of honey in it is that the deer family meat, the venison, which we call, is slightly bitter, and the honey tends to balance it out. So now I need about 6.2 ounces of honey, and again I recommend that you get yourself a little scale and weigh it carefully, because if you think that a cup of honey is 8 ounces, it is not. A cup of honey will weigh probably around 12 ounces, because it is much heavier than water. So you have to be careful about it. Okay. You can, if you want to, dissolve the honey first in a small amount of warm water, as it says so in the recipe, I believe, because honey, trying to dissolve it in cold water will give you a little bit of a tussle. It doesn't want to dissolve so well. So if you have a large amount of venison to be cured, then you probably want to use just a little bit of warm water to dissolve the honey in it, and then cold water, so that the final temperature of the cure is 40 degrees. I am going to add now I need 2 3/4 cups of water in total. So I'm going to add a 3/4 cup of warm water first, and then I will get myself ready 2 cups of very cold water. It actually could be ice cold, but this time of year we're having nice cold water already in the running. Two cups of cold water, and what I'm going to do is first dissolve the sugar, which is the dextrose, the pickling salt, and the honey in the warm water. And then as soon as I have this dissolved, then I add the cold water, which should temper it down to about 40 degrees. If it is not cold enough, you can always refrigerate it for a while. Okay, and now I have a little hand pump here. If you are concerned about the ingredients and the tools, any butcher supply store in your area should carry dextrose and curing salt and pump for brining like this. It's called a brining pump. They have various sizes of brining pumps. If you would be doing a lot of curing, you can even get an electric one, which will pump by pulling a trigger on it only. So first we make sure that all the salt, the dextrose and the curing salt and the honey is properly dissolved and distributed. It's very important in the water solution. And then you're going to see, I will probably put this on an incline a little bit, and I'm going to draw. Okay, I'm going to draw solution into the pump, and I have 2 bottom rounds here which are trimmed off just the heavy fat which was covering it, but not the silver skin covering. And now you start pumping. You can see how the meat is inflating here, sort of like a rubber ball when you are pumping air into it. And now we will again draw some more and continue this process until we pump the meat. You don't have to worry about, the recipe calls for increasing the weight of the meat by 15%. Well, I'll tell you a little secret. There is no way that you can possibly put more than 15% into the meat, because what will happen once there is too much cure in it, it will just start leaking out all over the place. And so you don't have to worry about really putting too much cure into the meat, because it cannot happen. So just pump it as much as you can, and the rest will run out. Curing it just by immersing it in the brine will take much, much longer to accomplish the curing process. Nowadays, all commercially smoked and cured meats are, pumped by high pressure electric pumps. And the purpose for curing the meat is to avoid bacteria growth in the smoker, because once the meat is in the smokehouse, the temperature of the smokehouse is considerably higher than would be permissible to keep meat for long times, and there is always a danger of bacteria growth. And so the curing of whatever you're going to smoke, whether it is meat, poultry, game, fish, whatever you're going to smoke, it is definitely advisable to cure the the items first. It's very important. Otherwise, you may have botulism and other bacteria growth occurring in it. And now that we finished pumping the meat, we're going to put it back into the brine. The brine that is remaining from pumping the meat then will cover the meat. The meat will be immersed in it. And again, be sure that you use non-staining vessels, bowls or dishes, whatever you're going to cure the meat in, because otherwise you will have bad surprise. So it has to be either glass or plastic or stainless steel or ceramic. Now we're going to cover it. And again, I have weighed the meat in advance. This was slightly over 3 pounds of meat total, so we have 1.5 pounds here. And since we are brining it an hour per pound, I'm going to now put it in a refrigerator and brine it exactly 1.5 hours, and then it will be ready to pull it out of the brine. And now we're going to proceed to make the venison roast. I have pulled the meat out of the marinade here, and we are going to show you how to lard this. This is a top round of the venison, and I'm going to show you how to lard it. Now, if some of you are concerned about fat content and cholesterol and so on, then obviously you would want to lard it. But nevertheless, I would have liked to show you how I would go about larding the meat, which adds a lot of flavor to the meat. Okay, I have a piece of smoked back fat. You can also use slab bacon. If you use slab bacon, I suggest that you cut off the lean parts and just use the fat parts. And you slice it first into strips like that, and then you slice the strips into smaller strips, which will be smaller than a pencil size, like so, smaller than a pencil size, because you don't want really big hunks of fat in the meat. Okay. Then I have a needle here. Again, you can purchase a needle like that in many stores that sell specializing in cooking equipment. Also, butcher supply stores will have larding needles. This here is a larding needle, and there are different models and different sizes and so on. These are relatively small size, and what you do is you insert the end of the fat into the needle, and then you thread the needle under the surface of the meat, not deep into the center of the meat, but just under the surface. You pull the needle out from the other side. Let me see, I'll probably have to use a towel here to grip it. It gets a little bit slippery. And you pull the needle out the other side, being careful that you don't pull the fat completely through. You can see a little bit of it poking out on either end, which is exactly what we want. And now you're going to continue with this to lard the entire piece of venison. You space the larding, or I would say 1.5 to 2 inches apart. Here you can see again where one end and the other end over here. And just under the surface of the meat, not too close to the surface, because that might actually puncture the surface and burst out. So you have to be careful not to go too close to the surface again. But here you go around, on if the piece is thick on both sides. If it's a thin piece, then you just lard it on one side only. What does the larding exactly, what is the purpose of the larding? Well, larding will accomplish two things. Since venison is a very lean meat, it will moisten the meat and make it nicer eating. Number two, even more importantly, it will flavor the meat, because again, venison is just a touch on the bitter side, especially if you get a buck from areas where they had to subsist in the wintertime on some cedar branches and so on. It may be quite bitter, and so this will make the meat taste sweeter, kind of more mellow. Okay, at this point I have a skillet on the fire here, and we're going to get it nice and hot, and I don't know if I should turn the fan on, and you want to preheat the skillet really well, because if the skillet is not preheated well, you will have problem with browning the meat. What you want to do is to first brown the meat on all sides and then put it in the oven to finish it. In the meanwhile, I have another small pot here, and I am going to use a little bit of the fat also, if you want, into the sauce, which will give it an extra flavor, and some butter, and I'm going to use the vegetables from the marinade and some of the marinade to start the sauce, the sour cream sauce for it. So we're going to put a little bit of butter with a little bit of smoked back fat. About that much would be good. And I have the vegetables here, and I'm going to add the vegetables to it. There we go. And the vegetables have the spices in them already. We may make sure that we have enough spices in it for flavor wise. It's important. And in the other pan, I'm going to put a little bit of vegetable oil only, and I need some salt here. I'm going to salt the meat. Okay, it's important that the pan is fairly hot, otherwise the meat is not going to brown very well. You put a little bit of oil in, and you put the meat in, and we brown it on one side first, and then we brown it on the other side, and then we're going to put it in the oven to finish it in the oven. I have the vegetables going here at the same time. Let me turn this down a little bit. Searing it pretty well. There we go. The purpose for searing the meat is to really seal the juices in and have a nice brown finish to it. And I have the oven turned on to 400 degrees, and we're going to finish the meat in the oven, and we're going to make the sauce while the meat is cooking. There we go. And now that I have browned the meat on both sides, I'm going to put it in the oven and finish it in the oven. And now the vegetables have browned slightly. You don't want to get them too brown. And I'm going to use some of the juice from the marinade here to add to it. And I have roasted the bones of the venison with some pork bones together in advance, and I made myself a nice brown stock. That's what we call brown stock. And I'm going to pour some of that brown stock in. And now we're going to simmer both of these together. If you have, I have a piece of that rind here from the back fat, and if you have that, you can add a piece of it to the sauce also. Maybe I cut it into a couple pieces here. And that will really add a lot of flavor to the sauce. And now we'll start cooking the sauce here, and we will come back to you in a little while when when things are a little more further down the road. Next, we're going to show you how to do the pot roast. Pot roast with port wine and dried fruits. I'm going to shut the fan off here so you can hear me better. And I have the meat here, the marinated meat, which is, this part is from the shoulder. It is the chuck, which is the thickest part of the shoulder. Now, I did not lard this one because I have demonstrated the larding in the previous segment. If you like to lard it, you will proceed exactly the same way by always larding in the direction of the grain of the meat. That is important. I have a pan on the fire here, and I'm going to put some, this is clarified butter, what we call, which means butter that has been melted, and you only use the clear part of the butter so that you don't have the milk solids. It is the milk solids in a butter that will burn eventually when the pan gets really hot. And for that reason, we are clarifying the butter by melting it slowly over a hot water bath, and then you just skim off the clear part only. That's for cooking, any cooking with butters, sauteing and so on, you generally use clarified butter. Again, to do the clarified butter, I'll say it one more time, is you melt a good amount of butter in a pan set into hot water or boiling water, but melt it fairly slow. And the butter which melts in this manner will separate completely so that you have a clear part on top and the milk of the butter on the bottom. If you put the pan on a fire on a direct heat, the milk will emulsify together with the clear part, and you will not get clarified butter. So it is important to do it over hot water. Okay, my pan got hot here. I'm going to put some salt on this again, and what I'm using here is a mixture of kosher salt and black pepper. That's our uniform kind of a seasoning salt. Now we're going to put the meat in, and I'll have to put a fan back on so we don't create too much smoke in here. And I'm going to brown the meat on both sides for the pot roast. And I have the vegetables here from the marinade with some of the wine and liquid from the marinade. We're going to use that in the pan also. We're going to get rid of this. And so now we're browning the meat. Let's see what it looks like. Just a wee bit more. There we go. The browning of meat is important for the flavor of the finished pot roast. And I have a nice pan here. We're going to transfer it into the pan, and then we're going to bake it in the oven. Pot roast basically is made always from tougher parts of the meat, which are not suitable to make a regular roast. When I say regular roast, I'm talking about meat which is roasted medium rare and it's very tender and so on. Pot roast, we braise the meat by making pot roast, and we use tougher parts of meat which are not suitable for roasting or steaks. And then what we do is we braise it with liquid in the oven, which will tenderize the meat over a longer period of cooking time, and of course the meat will be all well done. Okay, now that we brown it, I'm going to transfer it, and I'm going to put the rest of the vegetables here and herbs and spices into the pan first, and we want to brown the vegetables lightly also. If you don't brown the vegetables, again, you will lose a lot of the flavor that the browned vegetables will give you. When you're browning the vegetables, it is very similar to caramelizing sugar. Plain sugar has one taste, which is just plainly sweet, but caramelized sugar has another taste, which is altogether different. And so that's what caramelizing vegetables will do. I'm going to add a little more butter. The pan got a little bit dry on me, so we're going to add a little more butter to it here, so the vegetables will brown better. And again, I have the brown stock here, which I'm going to use. The brown stock is so important if you want to accomplish a really good flavored brown sauce. Then you should definitely consider making a brown stock. You have the recipe in your booklet how to make that. And when you are boning out the deer, that would be the first thing you consider, is using the bones and any of the trimmings, not fat mind you, but any of the sinews and other trimmings that are not usable, you can all use those in making of the brown stock. I recommend that besides the venison bones, the deer bones, that you also add little pork bones or even chicken bones to it, because they will add more mellowness and more browning ingredients really into the stock. And you make the stock in advance, and then you can reduce it later on and freeze it. By reducing, you put it the clear stock without fat. Next day after you make the stock one day, and then you strain it and you cool it overnight, and next day you remove any fat that is on the surface, and you put it back on the fire, and then you can boil it down to a smaller amount. And after it is down to almost syrupy consistency, you pour it out into a larger pan and let it congeal. And after it congeals, you can cut it into cubes and wrap those in a plastic and toss them in your freezer. And then later on, when you're making any kind of a pot roast or even roast or stew or anything like that, you have brown stock to use in place of water when making the roast or the sauce eventually, and it will be such a big difference on your finished product when you make that sauce. So here we have the pot roast, and you see the liquid and the vegetables and everything, and I'm going to put a lid on it, and I'm going to put it in a slow oven, like 325 degree oven, and let it cook slowly for a period of maybe an hour and a half or so, until I check it with a fork and will get it fork tender. There we go. And here we are checking the sauce for the sour cream sauce, and that we will be proceeding on that also and finishing the sour cream sauce. The roast is ready now to come out of the oven, and so we're going to take it out, and we are going to let it rest for a little while, because anytime you get roast out of the oven, you should never cut it immediately, because the roast is pressurized, and once you cut into it immediately, all the juice will run out, and so you have a drier piece of meat, number one, and number two, the color will not be so pretty either. So if you let the roast rest for a while, it will develop a nice pink color to it, and you have a more juicy meat. In the meanwhile, I'm going to finish the sauce here. So I have a lemon here, and I'm going to take a couple strips of peel and drop them in for added aromatic flavor to it. And I have a little bit of mustard here, and I'm going to squirt just a little mustard into it. Whoops. And now I'm going to whip in the sour cream. I have sour cream here, and I'm going to add just enough to make a nice sour cream sauce with it. And it is best to use a little whip like that to make sure that we get the sauce nice and smooth. Now we can cook this for a little while yet. And after we cook it, we are going to strain it. We can also use some of the juice from the pan of the meat, or all of the juice I should say, and add that to the sauce, because that will definitely enhance the flavor of it, making the sauce taste richer. And I'm going to let it cook just a couple minutes, and then we're going to strain it. I have a wire strainer here. I'm going to pour the sauce into this wire mesh strainer. You can use other strainers also, as long as it works. And we're going to get every bit of the sauce out. And you preferably use a ladle and push on the vegetables to really squeeze out. It really doesn't hurt if you even puree some of the vegetables right into the sauce. It will actually enhance the flavor of the sauce. And so you strain it like that. And after you strain it, you're going to have a nice sauce, and you're going to have a nice roast. We are ready now to start slicing the roast, and the roast has rested, and here you see the proper color of it, and we're going to take a few slices like that. You can see the larding in it a little bit, and we have the sauce here, and I'm going to, you always, when you have a medium rare meat, you always want to put the sauce on the bottom of the plate, because if you put it over the meat, it will really hide the beauty of the meat. So you always put sauce on a medium rare meat on the bottom. If the meat is well done, then you mask it with the sauce, because it doesn't look so nice. And here we have a completed dish, which has some noodles on it, grilled shiitakes, braised leek with little breadcrumbs sprinkled over it. I have little pomegranate seeds around the meat, and finished it with a sprig of herbs as a final touch. At this point, the brined venison, the two bottom rounds that we brined, they are ready now, cured. You can see how the color has changed to kind of dark purple, which is always the case of cured red meat. And we discard the rest of the brine. You should never reuse the brine, because it has been diluted by some of the juices of the meat, so it will not really work very well if you wanted to reuse it. So you have to start with a clean brine, brand new, from the beginning again. What you do with this meat now is you rinse it with cold water and put it on rags to dry. And after it dries, it will develop what is called a pellicle, which is like a film, like a sticky film over the surface of the meat. At that point, you would put a little bit of oil on the meat, and you are ready for smoking. You are ready for putting it in the smoker. But it is best to leave it probably overnight, or at least for 6 hours in a refrigerator on a rack, developing that pellicle. If you don't let the pellicle develop, you will not get nice color on the meat, on the surface of the meat. But now, if you were to cook this meat now, no matter how you would cook it, the meat will turn red, just like corned beef. So that is one part of, cured meat, that from now on, it will be always red, regardless how you cook it. And you really won't be able to tell the doneness of the meat by looking at the color of it. So the doneness of the meat would have to be checked with a thermometer. So if you were to smoke the venison in a cold smoke first, which I recommend doing, is cold smoke it by means of having the smoke generator distanced from the smokehouse so that the smokehouse temperature never exceeds 90 degrees. That is cold smoking. That you have the fire, the smoke generator someplace away from the smokehouse itself, and ducted, the smoke is ducted into the smokehouse so the smokehouse temperature never exceeds 90 degrees. Then you cold smoke it, and after you may cold smoke it for 2-3 days that way, depending on the density of the smoke. You know, it's hard to say how long to smoke something exactly because it is variable depending on the density of the smoke. So if you cold smoke the venison after it is smoked, you can roast it just like we roasted the roast venison to medium rare by searing both sides and pop it in the oven. A piece of meat like this, I would say about 20 minutes, 25 maximum in a 400 degree oven to internal temperature of about 115 degrees. And then you take it out and let it get cold. When it's cold or lukewarm, you can slice it and you will have a very, very juicy smoked venison that way. But if you hot smoke it, there is a great chance that your venison will be very crumbly and dry to the taste. We are going to take the pot roast out of the oven now and finish the sauce. So here we have the pot roast. I'm going to transfer the meat to a smaller skillet. Get rid of the lid here, and we are going to strain the juices of the pot roast into a smaller pan. In this case, we do not want to press too hard because if you want to keep the sauce clean, then you just drain it off and don't really press the vegetables by forcing them through the strainer. And we're going to bring this to simmer again, and I have brought some starch with me here, and we're going to thicken the sauce by adding a little bit of starch to it. We don't want to add too much. And some port wine. And we're going to add a little bit of a currant jelly to the sauce. Not much, we don't want to get it too sweet. You have to be careful about that. And then I have the port wine with a little starch dissolved in it. You can always add a little, it's best to add less starch at the beginning and then a little more towards, if you need to thicken it a little more, you can always add a little more afterwards. And now when the juice is boiling, you pour the wine and the starch into the sauce. Looks like I may need just a little more starch. As a rule, when you're making pot roast, you really don't want the sauce overly thick. So it is better to have the sauce kind of syrupy consistency, I would call it, rather than too thick. Going to add a little more starch with a little more port wine. Sauce like that, if you like to, you could even finish it with a little touch of brandy or even a touch of rum at the end. But you don't want to put in too much so it isn't too obvious. You just put a tablespoon or so in, which will enhance the flavor without making it too obvious. Here you can see the nice consistency of the sauce right now. And if you like to, you can finish it with a little bit of raw butter. When I say raw butter, that means butter which has not been melted. The butter will finish the sauce by giving it a nice kind of a velvety appearance and taste also. It will kind of smoothen the wrinkles, so to speak, in the sauce. And to do that, you best use a whisk, a wire whisk like this, and you can take small pieces of the butter at a time and whisk them into the boiling sauce, a few at a time like that. And that will add a nice kind of a smooth finish to the sauce. So after you add the butter, you should stop all boiling, because it would cause a danger of the butter separating in the sauce and floating to the top, which would not be a desirable situation, needless to say. Okay, and at this point you can taste it and correct the seasoning. If there is any problem with it, you can still do that. That's about where we would like to have it. And you are all done. And now, of course, you can slice the pot roast. The pot roast can be sliced as soon as it comes out of the oven, because being well done, it is not pressurized as a roast which is medium rare. And so, we lost our knife over here, and we're going to slice. Always when you're slicing meat, always slice against the grain. That's very important, because if you slice with a grain, you're going to get a very tough meat. And on a pot roast, you serve the sauce over. Now, if you like to, you can further enhance the sauce by adding some dried fruit. To add the dried fruit, you can either add them to the sauce at this point, such as apricots, raisins, currants, even prunes, if you like, or dried cherries, and they will give a nice color to the finished dish on the plate. And we're going to show you the results. And here we have the finished dish. As you can see, I have garnished the meat with some plumped apricots and raisins and dried cherries. And we have a broccoli on the plate and some spätzles. The spätzles, of course, are listed in the recipe booklet, and you should have any problem making some spätzles in advance and then sauteing them a little bit in butter to a little bit golden brown and serving them as an accompaniment to the dish. And so, as far as the recipe is concerned, all your recipes and all the details that you would like to know about this dish are in your accompanying booklet that comes with the video. In this segment of the tape, we are going to show you how to make a stew, a good tasting stew. I have some shank meat here. Now, any part of the deer, well, maybe I should rephrase that. The tougher parts of the deer, which are still nice meat but are fairly tough, are best suited for stew. And that includes the shanks and the neck part and parts of the shoulder and so on. Those are good stew meat candidates. And a good stew can be sometimes better than a bad steak. So, it depends how much care you give to it and so on. I'm going to preheat a skillet here. And we are going to cut up the meat first into nice sized chunks. When you're making a stew, you really don't want to cut it up into very small pieces because it does not look nice. The meat will shrink during cooking, undoubtedly, and if you cut it too small to start out with, eventually it kind of looks like a hash, and so you don't want to do that. So even for stew, you want to have nice, decent sized chunks of meat. If you encounter heavy sinews or any pieces of fat, you trim those off, but the meat does not need and should not be really trimmed off all the sinews, meaning the silver skin. You know, the silver skin, there's some tough ends here which we're going to remove, but the silver skin actually will keep the meat from drying out during cooking, and eventually will dissolve into kind of a gelatinous mass, and will actually improve the consistency of the stew. So you don't want to trim all the sinews out. That would not be necessary at all. Okay, so now we have the meat cut up. I have a little bit of bacon fat here. Now, if you don't like to use bacon fat, if you are, you know, cautious about your cholesterol intake and so on, you may want to use olive oil, let's say, or any other kind of oil that would be, you know, suitable for cooking. But bacon fat will again give it a better flavor if you use that, or even just straight pork fat. Okay, I'm going to turn the fan on now so we can see through the smoke here. When you are browning meat like that, any kind of meat, you don't want to crowd the pan too much. You want to leave just one layer of meat, and don't keep stirring it any more than you have to, because the more you stir it, the more the meat will release juice, and when the meat releases juice, it will stop browning. It will start boiling in the pan, and then you have great difficulty browning it. While the meat is browning, we can chop up some onion, and we're going to use some onion in the stew. After the meat browns on one side, then you turn it over and brown it on the other side. Just like if you would be cooking a steak, let's say. But again, even if you are doing stir frying, you should not stir and stir and stir unless you would have a really exceptionally high cooking surface, which is unlikely. You know, for example, the Chinese, they used to cook on a shovel over an open fire. Well, that may be different, you know, but if you just cook on a regular stove, you probably will not have that much heat. So it is better to brown the meat on one side and turn it over on the other side. Now, if you have more meat than that and the skillet cannot hold one layer of the meat, then you do it in sections. You brown part of the meat, get it out of the skillet, and you brown some more meat and so on. If there is any juice that has stuck to the bottom of the pan, you have to remove that juice, because you have to deglaze it and start with a clean pan, because any accumulation on the bottom of the pan will prevent the next batch of meat from browning. It will, the pan will burn actually, and the meat will not brown. So if you have any particles stuck to the bottom pan, as I am starting to get now, you will, for the next batch of meat, you would have to pour some liquid into the pan, like wine or whatever, and deglaze the pan. Of course, use the drippings in making the sauce afterwards, and get the pan good and clean for the next batch of meat. Here we have a good amount of onions, which is also fairly important. And I have a pot here, and we're going to put the meat into the pot as soon as it's brown now, which is about now. And now I'm going to add the onions, which will deglaze the pan also. Deglazing means removing the brown sediment that has adhered to the pan. If the pan is dry, you may add a little more fat to it, because otherwise the onions will not brown very well. They will be kind of just getting stuck to the bottom and not really getting much in place. You can see first the onions will brown from the sediment of the pan, and once they will pick that up, then the onions themselves can brown. If you're adding garlic, you cannot add garlic at the same time you add the onions. If you want to brown the onions, the garlic will burn far ahead before the onions ever get brown. So the garlic has to be added later. But if you're adding any vegetables to the stew, I recommend that you either cook the vegetables completely separately, maybe in a tiny small amount of butter and just maybe a tablespoon of water, and cover the vegetables with a lid and cook them very slowly until they are tender, and then add them to the finished stew. That way the vegetables will be very clean looking in the stew and very appealing. Otherwise, you can add the vegetables towards the end of the cooking of the stew, maybe 15 minutes or so before you finish cooking the stew, so that they don't fall into a mush and turn brown, because you like to serve the vegetables nice, that they are still really nice looking. Let's see, I have some paprika here and I have some garlic here, and I'm going to add a little bit of garlic first, and I'm going to add a little paprika with it. Also, when you're adding paprika, or let's say curry powder, to a curry dish, you should always saute this type of spice with a little bit of fat, which I'm doing now. That will improve the color and the flavor of the spice. Okay, and now that we have sauteed the garlic and the paprika a little bit, now we're going to add some red wine. I have not seasoned the meat as yet. If you're browning a stew, it is best that you don't season the meat with salt in advance, because the salt will make the meat wet, and then it will be not so easy to brown when the meat is wet. So I'm going to add the salt to it now only. And I also add some game spice. In the booklet accompanying the tape, you have a recipe for a game spice that we use for pheasants and other small game. And also, when you have a stew, you can add some game spice directly to the stew like that. So later on, because it's ground, you don't have to bother about looking for every grain of pepper and so on to pick it out again. And I have some brown stock again. As I mentioned before, the brown stock is always so important in cooking, and it will make a tremendous difference on the finished product if you have a brown stock, or if you're just using water and maybe a bouillon cube instead, because the brown stock will give it a wonderful depth in flavor. Also, if you have any pork skins, which I believe I have a piece of pork skin over here someplace, if you have any pork skins or bacon rind, you can throw that into the stew and cook it with the stew. You're going to throw it out after it's cooked, and that also will add a wonderful kind of a sweet flavor and depth to the sauce. All these little tricks are so important and so noticeable in the finished product afterwards. So now we're going to pour it off into the pot together with the stew, and we'll be ready to start slowly simmering the stew. That's another word of caution. When you are cooking any kind of meat like this, you really don't want to cook it very fast, regardless in how much hurry you are to get it done. Because if you cook the meat over a very high heat fast, what will happen is the excess heat will draw a lot of moisture out of the meat. So you're going to wind up with a very dry, crumbly type of product. So you should always simmer stews, and when you're cooking pot roast, cook it at a low temperature, and if you even boiling a chicken, you should cook it at a very low temperature, and then you're going to get a nice moist product. So I'm going to put a lid on this yet, and we're going to let it simmer for a while until it gets nice and tender, and then we're going to show you the finished results. Okay, and here we are going to show you the finished stew, and as you notice, I have put some carrots and celery and pearl onions into it, and I cook those very gently separately first in just a little bit of butter and just a tiny amount of water, covered until they are tender, and then last I also added some peas, which does not even need to be cooked hardly at all, and that will highlight the stew a little bit. And then as a garnish I have some cauliflower with it, and I have polenta. Now again, you have a recipe in your accompanying booklet for the polenta. And for this particular polenta, I have poured it out onto a sheet pan, and after it has set up kind of like a pudding, I cut it into these diamond-shaped pieces, and I saute them in a small amount of butter in a Teflon pan so they don't stick, and you have a nice browned crusty polenta to go with it, which makes a nice accompaniment. In this segment, we're going to show you how to make venison steaks. Now I have the best part of the venison right here, which are the back stabs, as the hunters call them, or really the loin of the venison. And I have already removed the outer covering which comes over this end here, which is like a cap which comes near the shoulder. So that is already removed. And what I'm going to do now is take the silver skin off. Now it is not absolutely necessary that you do remove the silver skin. However, if you want a really perfect eating consistency in which you don't have to really chew on anything or spit anything out at the table, then you may want to do that. In quick cooking, the silver skin will not become tender. It will become tender if you would make a pot roast out of it, a stew, then it's fine to leave it on. Okay. There is also a little bit of a chain, what we call, which is technically called the side muscle. And this is the side muscle here. The chain itself is edible meat. However, it has a lot of little sinews that run through it, and therefore we also remove that. Now, depending how fancy you want to get, you may really try to get every little piece of the silver skin off from both sides of it. This side here is the side that has been against the ribs of the animal. And that is, depending how close you get it to the bone, you're going to leave a little bit of the silver skin on, but little tiny pieces really don't matter. Okay. Now at this point, you can either cut single medallions, or you can cut part way through, and then the next one cut all the way through and open it up to make a big steak out of it. Either way you go, it'll be fine. But whatever you do, I suggest that you cut nice thick pieces like that, so that you have a nice looking steak. Then you can set them on the end like that, and as you see me doing here, push them down so they come nice and kind of like a medallion size. Okay, now I will preheat my pan right now, and we got this. Again, all these trimmings should be used in preparation of a brown stock. So you should not really throw too much away, except the only thing that you always throw away is the fat, because the fat is not good for really any purpose whatsoever. Now we're going to season it. Again, I'm using here a mixture of kosher salt with fresh ground black pepper. You can also, if you like to, put a little bit of garlic powder into that, which further enhances the flavor. Kosher salt is lighter, and therefore you can use more of it than if you would be using just straight regular kitchen salt. Okay, we have mushrooms here. Always, please always use fresh mushrooms. Don't use canned mushrooms because they look and taste like rubber balls. Now, if you like to eat rubber balls, that's different. But otherwise, I suggest that you do not. This thing going hot? Yes, it is slowly. That you do not buy canned mushrooms, but always buy nice fresh mushrooms, which are available from any supermarket nowadays. When you buy mushrooms, try to find nice white ones, and when you keep them in your refrigerator, never keep them in a plastic bag, or if they come already wrapped in a plastic covering, remove that plastic covering and put them in a plain brown paper bag and leave a little bit of opening on them so they can breathe, because technically they are still alive, and if you close them real tight in a plastic bag, they will suffocate and go rotten very, very fast. So they need some space to breathe, and they like to be in paper rather than leaving them in plastic. Okay, I have I hope my pan is getting hot. I have some clarified butter here. We just congealed, of course, but nevertheless it is clarified butter. And we're going to put some in here. I'm going to turn the fan on for you. And now we can put the medallions in. Okay, and I'm going to turn the fire down a little bit. And while they are cooking, I'm going to chop some shallots. And if you don't have shallots, and again, shallots are also available in supermarkets nowadays. And if you can't find them, well, scallions or even a little bit of regular onion may be substituted. That's a lot of shallots. We probably won't even use them all. And the mushrooms. Mushrooms, you know, some people say don't wash them, just wipe them with a damp paper towel or something. Well, it's okay to wash them providing that you don't soak them very long. That is the worst thing, not soaking them. You wash them very quickly and drain them right away. And only wash them just before you're going to use them. Don't wash them too far in advance, because they do tend to absorb a lot of moisture, and then that is what turns them black later on. I guess we're going to turn it down a little more here. If you have extremely thick steaks, you might even finish them in the oven later on. That's fine, in a good hot oven like 400, 450 degree oven. So I have some sherry wine here, and I have some heavy cream. And if you don't like to use the heavy cream or don't like to use the butter, well, you can use olive oil very well. And instead of the heavy cream, you can use a little bit of yogurt if you are very much health conscious. The same thing in the sour cream sauce on the roast venison. Again, instead of sour cream, you can use yogurt. Sometimes you can even set the steaks aside a little bit and already start adding your other ingredients into it, such as your shallots and your mushrooms. You always add the shallots first. I can add a touch more butter to it. Add the shallots first and let them only foam up. You don't want to brown them because they get kind of bitter if you let them brown. So you don't want to brown them. Just let them foam up a little bit. They get translucent, and then you add your mushrooms to it also. Now, if you like a lot of mushrooms, you can put more. You stir it up so that the shallots get cooled off and don't brown on the bottom. and we continue cooking the meat still at the same time. Maybe we even add a little more mushrooms to it. Mushrooms will cook down, so when it looks like a lot at the beginning, it will cook down and will be only about half as much as you started out with after they are cooked. And by the way, either use tongs, or if you use a fork, put the fork only into the edge of the steak. You never stab the steak right through the heart of it, right through the center of it, or use your hand and gently remove the steaks like so. Never ever stab the steak right through the center, because when you do that, you're going to cause it to bleed, and you lose a lot of juice that way. So here we deglaze the pan, cook the mushrooms a little more. When you are choosing garnishes for your game dishes, always consider what will go well with the different dishes. If you have a dish that has a lot of sauce in it, like a pot roast or stew, then you do not want to serve browned potatoes with it or rice pilaf, because those items are non-absorbent and you need something to absorb the sauce. So with a stew or a pot roast, you would serve noodles or spätzles or plain steamed rice, or even just simple potatoes, or a slice of or two slices of bread, which will be then broken and dipped into the sauce to finish the sauce with it. That is by far better than browned potatoes. Okay, at this point I can add a little bit of the sherry wine. We don't want to add too much so it does not have a strong kind of an alcoholic overtone. However, if you like, instead of sherry, you can use, of course, Madeira wine, which is somewhat similar, and you can also use cognac or brandy instead of that. I would not use any sweet tasting liqueur. That would not belong in this dish. And you know, if you use cognac, you may even use a little less than if you use sherry or other type of wine. You can also use red wine or even white wine instead. And then last but not least, you would add a little bit of the cream. And as I mentioned before, if you are health conscious, you may then use yogurt instead. I would add the yogurt at the very end so that when you cook it, it will not break, because it can curdle. If you cook it for a long time, the yogurt can curdle, and then you will have little kind of hard specks floating in the sauce, which would not look all that appealing. So it would be best to reduce the juice in the pan till it's almost dry, and then just kind of stir in the yogurt, warm it up, and go with it. And now we are ready for plating. You can either pour the sauce with the mushrooms completely over the steaks. It's maybe touch a little, maybe just a little more, a little bit liquid yet. You can either pour the sauce with the mushrooms completely over the meat, or you can pour it off to one side to make it look prettier, you know. Depends how you want to arrange it on a plate, really. This would be enough for two people or one really big eater. There we go. A little more reduction, and now you can pour the mushrooms and the sauce over the finished dish. And now we're going to show you how we're going to garnish it and finish it as a final product. And here we have portioned it out for you. And this is how we would present it in our hunting camp. Don't you do that in your hunting camp like that? That's venison steak, or medallions you can call them, with mushrooms. I have some green beans, some red skin potatoes, and a little bouquet of herbs to kind of highlight the plate. And so here we go on the best meat from the deer. Thank you for coming through with us in this video, having the patience to watch us, and please follow your recipes in your accompanying booklets to have everything down exactly. And we will be looking forward to seeing you in our next video, which will show small game preparation, including the small furred game and also the feathered game. Thank you for being with us.